Hello and welcome. My name is Carmen Farino, and we are here for this program, and I want to introduce the two people on our stage. Her Excellency Engineer Anwar Al-Shamiri, Executive Director of Geospatial Governance Sector at the Federal Geographic Information Center. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And Anne Cecily Lassa Gonzalez, the Head of Group Sustainability at Global Connect. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to start off by just asking you to tell us a little bit about what you do and why it's important when we think in terms of AI and sustainability.
So first of all, the Federal Geographic Information Center is the federal arm for managing the geospatial, I would call it scope. The geospatial sector in UAE, and in collaboration with all the local entities as well as the private sector and the requirements that would fulfill the needs of other federal entities. And we are the creators of the UAE Atlas. It has been published already, it's online. So you can access UAE Atlas with all the data that you would need. We have just also launched the UAE official general map just on the 5th of December, and you also can find it through the FGIC website. We have worked closely with the local government as well as the private sector to generate a system as well as the requirements of geospatial requirements as of policies, regulations, standards, to ensure that we fulfill the international requirements as well from this perspective. When it comes to AI, we have to differentiate between what is AI doing on the geospatial sector and what do we need. So when it comes to geospatial sector, and we have to clarify that on a local level or on the emirate level, we need to create something called, I would call it, that would help supporting the smart city concept, which is also creating the, I would call it, digital twin. So digital twin requires having a proper AI analysis as well. This is really required on an emirate level or on a state level. But when it comes to the federal level or the country level, you need to ensure that there are specific layers of data that are available to create the network of geodesy, geodetic reference, for example, and other data, clean data that would support the standardization, coherence, as well as creating kind of collaboration that will support the country on as well international level. For example, United Nations representation and all other entities.
Well, there's a fascinating piece about infilling data that I want to get to in a second, but I also want to explain what's interesting about this panel discussion is that you have two experts here who are on different sides of AI. So where Her Excellency is talking about her expertise in using AI to solve a lot of these problems, what we see with you in your role as a Chief Sustainability Officer is that as we add more computing power, we also have to manage how those computers operate, where their materials come from. So can you tell me a little bit about what you and your organization do?
Yeah, so I'm from Global Connect, which is the portfolio company of Mubadala. And what we do is that we provide digital infrastructure to Northern Europe. We stand for more than 50% of in digital infrastructure in Northern Europe. And what many people don't know, because we are part of the telecom industry, is that the telecom industry actually emits twice as much, close to twice as much as the aviation industry. And this is only increasing every single day due to the fact that digitization is increasing and the demand is increasing. So even though our industry and digitization might be an enabler for sustainable development, if the value chain is not responsible, we're going to end up doing more harm than good.
Wow. So keep that in your mind. For every advantage in computing that we have consequences, and we have to manage those consequences. So I want to come back to the solution side of it. When you don't have the data and you think about AI, you can extrapolate. You can use other sources of data. Can you talk a little bit about that and about why it's so important to have clean data in so you have clean data out in the modeling?
First of all, we have to consider that we need to create a proper infrastructure. And the better your infrastructure allocation, the less emissions you will have. So for example, if we have proper network or proper data infrastructure on the federal level that will support local level as well as private sector, you will have less waste of data, less computing requirements, and this will help because maps and narratives as well as attributes related to mapping, this consumes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It's heavy data. So we need to ensure that this is all aligned as well as with minimum interaction, I would call it.
Yeah.
When it comes to data missing data, one of the key points is, I'll give you an example, a location that had data for the last 20 years, while an adjacent location started similar data just 5 years ago.
Okay.
So using AI with location, you can use something with AI called infill data. And you, because of the location and geospatial location, you can generate your own based on scenarios as well as trend. So AI also support missing data in specific geospatial locations. This as well require having the proper knowledge from your team. You must ensure your team is trained well, you have the proper infrastructure, and then when it comes to data, where you are utilizing your data. Data works in innovation in something I could call it a ripple effect. So when you throw a stone and you have all these circles. So innovation come between these circles. Something you didn't expect will generate using AI from these data. So even if you consider that your data could generate X, Y, and Z kind of fields, but basically AI could generate unlimited fields that would support your decision making in the future.
So you could do that in scenario planning. So you could look at how a particular situation would evolve and then say, well, if this happens, these 5 other factors happen, now we can extrapolate a completely different set of circumstances.
Absolutely. I'll give you a quick example. When we talk about the Future Museum in Dubai, everyone, did you visit Future Museum in Dubai? Anyone knows the building? If you know it, raise your hand. Okay. So Future Museum has used generative design, which is an AI tool in Autodesk, to create the concept. And the concept could give you 3,000 concepts in no time.
Like a nanosecond, like that.
Yes. You need an army of architects to develop 10 concepts in 3 days, but this would give you 3,000 concepts in no time. What I mean here is we should not consider AI as a threat for a human or something that we don't know, but we need to utilize it in the proper way with time as well as quality of output if we have clean data again.
Well, so let's talk about that. The idea of looking forward and trying to understand what the future will bring. There's a technology that you use that I bet a lot of people in this room are not aware of. So can you talk about immersive cooling a little bit? Because I think it's fascinating when you look at the rise in computing power and the heat that's generated and the energy opportunities.
Yeah, so speaking of data is crucial when you're working with sustainability because that's the only way that we can get transparency.
Yep.
And by transparency, we can make transitions. And for us, data was a way for us to actually do things differently for us. When you're talking about our industry in general, a huge pollution effect is our data centers.
Yeah.
And when we looked at the data that we had on both scope 1, 2, and 3, since we're not a manufacturing company, the majority of our emissions stem from scope 3. This is pretty obvious. This is our value chain. But when we looked at scope 1, which is our own operation, 68% of our emission in scope 1 stem from data centers, and that was generators, diesel generators, refrigerants. So we knew that looking at data, we knew that we had to do something differently. So what we did was that we found a method called submerged cooling. It's part of immersive cooling as well, where you basically submerge the servers in a cooling liquid. And what it actually does is that it has a huge impact in terms of our power consumption. It reduces the power consumption up to 90%.
Wow.
Which is quite a bit. And on top of that, there is a 25% higher efficiency rate because the servers are being cooled down, so you can actually heat them up more drastically than before. There's also 20% less space being used when you have immersive cooling, so it takes up less space. And last but not least, there's a 20% lifespan of the equipment. So you can actually use the equipment for a much longer period of time compared to regular cooling systems. So there are lots of benefits, not only on a business level, but also in terms of environmental effects here.
I have this vision in my head of you coming up with harder problems to solve, and then you having increased computer power. And so we're constantly going in this ebb and flow as we try to solve complex problems. And then we need advanced technologies. And this through line of data keeps coming back. One of the things that we can do is really look at how do we find local solutions here? How do we build up capabilities in the UAE? So onshoring this capability gives us a real opportunity. So can you talk a little bit about the data and why it's so important to build this expertise in the UAE?
Yes, one of the things that we need to highlight is technology is there. But how to access technology, how to have proper collaboration with other fields is crucial. I'll give you a very interesting example which happened lately in Sharjah Emirates specifically. They started a pioneering project in UAE level, which is growing wheat. And to grow wheat, you need to consume a lot of water, you need a specific time of the year, and many aspects that as first-timers, you don't want to fail, basically. So the good thing is using aerial images, which is there.
Yes.
So aerial images had been used with infrared, I would call it mapping, to show where is the site that had less irrigation or require more irrigation to make sure you don't overuse water, resources, scarcity, as well as not over watering your crops, which might affect the quality at the end. So this would highlight that we have the data, we have technology, but we need to utilize it in a different way. I would believe that networking, more collaboration between entities, between technology owners, between specifically aerial images, the mapping sector is crucial because this is the base for any sector. And we could say that one of the countries, Germany, for example, they had highlighted that their data would be open source because it supports the economy.
Oh, wow.
And one of the key data requirements is mapping as well as geospatial knowledge as well, geospatial data. Yeah. So this would help. And when we talk about awareness and community as well as training, it's available. You can find it online. You can access some as well entities to have the proper universities as well. We have great universities here in UAE or outside UAE that works on creating this kind of learning process. Yeah. That would be supported through the training in one of the entities as well.
When you talk about maps, I hadn't really thought of it this way, but it is fascinating. When you have a map, you feel like you understand how to take on the journey. So you have a guide. Absolutely. And so that knowledge becomes power to act. So you go on this journey. And so it's fascinating to me when I think about the two journeys that you're both on. Because if I turn to you and Cicely, the journey you're on is really to understand the materials that you need to build these computers, how to manage them, how to look at end of life for those as part of what your role is. So how do you think about that map, and how do you put it together?
Well, data become crucial once again. Just to go a little bit back here, like I've been working with sustainable business development for the past 13 years. And when I started working with sustainability, it was more of a philanthropic sort of approach, where you would work for a company with a CEO that just came back from, let's say, Kenya, and suddenly wanted to support an orphanage in Kenya or something like that. It was it wasn't really based that much on clear data, right?
Yes.
That has changed. That landscape has changed dramatically lately, with new regulations coming into place, especially in the European Union.
Yep.
Larger companies would need to report, well, eventually all companies would need to report to the European Union. And in order to do that, we would need a greater understanding of the value chain, of the raw materials. We would need a greater understanding of Scope 3. And for an industry like the telecom industry that I come from, the IT industry, but actually any industry, it's very, very difficult to get these data.
Sure.
Because when we look at data centers, but actually electronic waste just on a global scale, e-waste is the fastest growing solid waste stream globally.
Oh, wow.
This is very much due to the high demand there is of digitization. So again, might be an enabler, but if you don't look into the value chain, you're going to do more bad than good, right? So if we don't have an understanding of where the raw materials are being excavated, how they're being excavated, what type of social impact, what type of environmental impact, which type of materials are actually part of those electronic equipments that you buy. If you don't refurbish them, if you don't recycle, if you don't reuse them, you're going to do more harm than good. So in order for us to do it better, we would need better data. We would probably need to look into AI and get a better understanding of our value chain, because some of these raw materials are not from our backyard. They are from mining areas in Chile or somewhere in Asia or Australia or somewhere else on the planet. And it's very, very difficult to get these information. So AI might be a tool for us to get that, right? To be able to do it better. And there is also an economic sort of benefit of recycling and looking into circular economy in general, because often it sort of cuts down the processes to a very limited area as well. So there might be, it's much cheaper, it's also less polluting in terms of reusing e-waste instead of excavating new raw materials.
Well, so and then again, that's another kind of mapping. And I think what I take from both of you as we think deeper on this issue is the interconnectivity of disciplines, whether it's organizational disciplines like you're talking about in the value chain, or whether it's bringing in other scientific disciplines. So if you're going to look at a crop yield, you're going to need meteorological data. You're going to need geographic data. You're going to need other experts, maybe agricultural experts, or even water management. So how do you think that can play as you add new factors in as these ecosystems, as you're trying to kind of heal these ecosystems? Is that a matter of building the expertise here? Are you looking at attracting more talent here to understand those issues? And does AI help with that too?
First of all, I would like to elaborate. AI is a tool, as you said. So people think that AI is the thing that we should always use. We talk about AI everywhere, but it's a tool. It's just a tool. So the whole thing is between our hands. Once we get the proper data, we can utilize AI. Otherwise, it will be very misleading.
Yes.
When it comes to the expertise, we don't need to have everyone under this one umbrella. Everyone specialized in their field, in their entity, or in their sector, but then the collaboration and the communication is the crucial. Because not everyone need to learn geospatial systems. Not everyone need to be specialized in GIS or mapping or cartography. but let's give everyone their specialty. These expertise collaborate together to generate something. During COVID days, for example, we had places everywhere around the world had been closed.
Yes.
And the first thing you would see anywhere is maps.
Yep.
Maps showing circles, big circle, small circle. And maps there did not require anything but data. So any expertise in their field, once they collaborate together, the mapping is happening.
Yeah.
It's eventually happening. So I would call it's a continuous learning process that would develop through an ecosystem that would need definitely emerging technology, because the data is about actual, on-spot, updated, clean data. It's not something that you will depend on something 20 years ago and that's it. You need to have a rhythm, you need to have a trend to utilize this more. And I would believe that we have specialties here, we have expertise here, but it's also important to see where other places going. Definitely I would call it the climate plays a role. The geopolitical situation plays a bigger role.
Sure.
So we have to consider all of these aspects.
Well, I mean, that's the idea, that these solutions don't exist in a vacuum, right? As you do this, you're looking for resources, you're looking for expertise. So you're managing a lot of different streams, but at the same time, everything that you do could be used by someone else. So they could take your modeling and then apply it somewhere else. And I think this idea of application migration, where you can apply a discipline to a completely different problem, is interesting, because AI can do that. So you can take a construct and then say, well, let me apply it in this way. And you see that sometimes with science. There was a need to remap the subway system in Tokyo. And so they looked to the way that a particular fungus always wound up finding the shortest route between two locations. So they actually created an opportunity for the fungus to rewire, kind of remap the entire subway system. And it's fascinating to me that in many ways you see the natural world having solutions, having opportunities. So that's another part of the legacy that I want to think about as a CSO. You know, you're being put into a situation where the responsibility is significant. You have to collaborate. So when I think about mining these materials and the fact that they may be in different parts of the world, you also have to understand the lives of the people. And we talk a lot about on this stage about equity and gender diversity being inextricably linked to climate. So how do you, when you think about your role, how do you approach the idea that you're connecting to so many different organizations and you're learning so much all the time, and you know, as you try to deliver the reports that you have to deliver?
So being a CSO, but just working with sustainability in general, of course you need to be a specialist in one area or the other, but the most important expertise is to be able to be a change manager. Because you're an internal resource, you can advise internally, but the execution needs to take place everywhere else in the organization, including the value chain. So of course, we would also need some type of both a greater collaboration, but also being able to educate our suppliers and being able to educate our internal stakeholders in how to do this properly. And I think, speaking again of AI and the importance of accurate data is going to be vital, because previously or many years back, not even many years back, I think maybe 5 years back, what we needed was a bit of information of what type of car were we driving, how many kilometers were we driving, and that was about it. But now we need valid data, because it needs to go to our accountants every single year. We need to make sure that this is validated data that we get from suppliers. And I think AI is going to be a pretty crucial tool, especially in the European Union, because it's more than 1,100 data points on ESG that we need to report on every single year.
1,100?
More than 1,100.
I mean, that's amazing to me. So you're essentially setting up an entire kind of ecosystem inside your organization, so that virtually everything that you do has to be measured and tracked.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where I would go back to you, Your Excellency. When you think about this, the idea of so much data being generated, where do you go for inspiration? When you think about the evolution of this and the problems to solve, are you looking at other fields? Are you diving deeper into your own field of expertise? Or are you really looking at just bringing different collections of people together to maybe look at a problem differently?
The good side is, personally, I had worked on the federal, local, as well as private sectors. So I had this exposure,
Yeah.
as well as a network, great network. On the same time, I'm an engineer that studied urban planning, then studied transportation planning as well and infrastructure. Then I had completed my PhD in policy making, in addition to having innovation and executive leadership from Cambridge and Oxford. So why I'm saying this gave me a different insight.
Yes.
And on the same time, each place where I studied gave me different way of dealing with data. For example, the American side, UC Berkeley, gave me different insight of how to deal with city management than how to deal with innovation from Cambridge. Why I'm saying this, learning is crucial. This doesn't come only by watching videos or listening to people like us. It also need a lot of learning.
Yes.
And when it comes to brainstorming, we need all the expertise possible to be in one place, virtually or physically. And here where for example, platforms like this or conferences would help. But we have to be specifying what do we need exactly. Because we can go as much as we want with AI and mapping, but we can also be specific in considering which problem we need to solve. Do we need to solve an issue related to sustainability? In which field of sustainability? Because we can talk about sustainability for many, many years, but we didn't hit a target.
Yes.
We need to get an outcome. What are expected outcomes? What are the goals that we anticipate to reach? So we have to specify what is the expected outcome always.
I'm going to, because we're both probably thinking the same way, but maybe you can comment a little bit, build on what she's saying around diversity of thought, diversity of background, all of that.
Yeah, I have a specific task that we would like to get solved. Because there's so many like raw materials that are being used in electronic equipments, right? So we need to, for instance, know, especially when in our cables, for instance, we are not the ones producing it, but it contains steel. We need to understand where that steel come from, how it was produced, how were the working conditions, were they being paid in a proper manner, how were they being handled, how were they being transported. This whole value chain is something that AI would be able to help with. And that is just one specific raw material, right?
Yep.
But there's so many other and especially when it comes to electronic equipment, this is one blurry landscape because it's being thrown off in areas. It creates air pollution. It can extract down to soil. It can eventually impact ecosystem. It can eventually impact food chains as well, which might end up in our bodies. So that whole value chain, especially when it comes to electronic equipments, if that could be traced in a much greater manner, it would create more transparency and more solutions.
So this is what I was getting at. As I listen to both of you talk, and I think about, I'm rolling through the disciplines in my head that are necessary to solve these problems, and the list just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of geography, diversity of experience. This diversity that we hear it feeds the data. You know, just the way that you described, you know, Cambridge is very different than UC Berkeley. I don't think you could get a different comparison in terms of disciplines and point of view. But that diversity, when you bring them together, helps triangulate a view of how to solve a problem. What I think is really fascinating about that is the next generation may find that these maps are infinitely more complex. Because each time you get down to the layer of where the connections are, there's another layer of connection. So how do you look at the future how do you think that flash forward of what is 5 years going to be like when you're successful? What is 10 years going to be like? How do you see this evolving?
In a federal level, I would always recommend creating the base maps. Because from country to country it's different, but base maps are essential. It's a start for everything else.
Yeah.
But the detailed layers would go to local emirates as well as local authorities. For example,
Okay.
environment, it will go to the authorities related to environment. But when you have the base map, it's like your guidance, it's your route to create the other requirements. Keeping base maps updated is crucial. There is no value of base maps that are not updated.
Okay.
We have, especially that we have many things happening around in the world. We have change in, adding kind of either by cutting or filling lands. You have islands that are created. You're creating roads. You are creating special infrastructure. For example, the Etihad Rail. All of this has to be there to ensure that you minimize the error or minimize the challenges that you might face. AI would help processing things faster.
Okay.
So some maps that would need 3 years to be created can be done in 8 days.
Wow.
In using AI. So where and when to use AI, again, once you have the proper data. It's like you have all the recipe ingredients, you have the recipe there, but then the timing is depending on how ready and how your kitchen is ready to prepare these.
Well, so as you say, the kitchen thing, I was thinking, it's like if you're going to bake a cake, you're not going to put it in a blast furnace. So, you need the right level of analysis for the right tool. But I was thinking about what you were saying, as I look at that role of sustainability, CSO, every year, it's not just you're throwing that data over your shoulder. That data then gets used as part of the modeling. So your customers are going to come back and say, well, what happened 5, 10 years ago? So the validity of that just kind of sets you up in this discipline where you're constantly looking at refining and checking and making sure that it's right. How do you see your role evolving over time? Is it going to get harder or is it going to get easier?
That is a really good question. I hope it gets easier because it's very complicated at the moment.
Because I think they keep raising the bar on you. As you master one, the requirements go up.
It does. I'm actually originally an anthropologist from background. And so I don't know, like, I initially didn't know much about biology or geography or whatever these type of natural sciences that I would need to understand, right? But I'm a scuba diver and I have a great interest in coral reefs and marine ecosystems. So that was actually what took me a bit further in terms of understanding how ecosystems work, right? Even though I don't know much about biology. I didn't do that initially.
Sure.
But my competencies within anthropology has understood how you could do change, because change doesn't happen just by creating technology if it's not being used properly. That's the same case for AI. If you don't use it in the right manner, it can cause more harm and more damage than good, right? So that was actually the initial way for me to think. It was the change management perspective. And I think in terms of making it easier looking forward, I don't think that sustainability is becoming easier because you just learn more and more moving forward. You just learn that, okay, we tried out this method, but there might be other risks related to that. Yeah. So we might get smarter and smarter moving along, but it doesn't get easier. We just keep learning. And I think maybe 10 years ago, everyone was talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah. Not a lot of people are talking about the Sustainable Development Goals anymore because we found out we needed to be more specific. So people started making regulations, started looking into different types of requirements like the science-based targets, which is like everyday work life for everyone working in the industry at the moment. So it just becomes more complex. The more you know, the more complex it gets.
Well, that's what I was going to get at. Even whether it's a micro level and thinking about imaging technology that now can see deeper in the body, so they're finding more things, so you're getting a better predictive model. Or you look at the telescopes that they have now in space that can look deeper and back into time. Each time we get that advance in technology, we're actually seeing a more complex world. So I want to shift gears, and it's not really a part of the topic, but I think as you've both spoken about your lives, it's come up. You're both multidisciplinary. You're bringing anthropology to environmental science and chief sustainability officer. You're building on such a broad expertise that it seems like you're intentionally, both of you intentionally, are creating this kind of multidisciplinary approach to your careers. Was that intentional, or was that something that, because you also have been run an innovation group,
Yes.
so very, very different disciplines. Did you plan that?
To be frank, I didn't plan it, but what I learned that focusing on engineering will not lead you to anything except engineering, to be frank. And I found that business would support engineering a lot.
Okay.
So, but I didn't go to business because at that time, long time ago, that was not really the thing for girls at that time. But what I found that once you look on a building level, it's important to understand what surrounds the building, which is urban planning. And also to understand what's beneath the building, which is infrastructure. And then you understand the roads network. That will lead to understanding the city level, which create a bigger network on a country level. So this was important for me to understand, and this is how it evolved. When it came to mapping, I didn't study GIS. GIS is a tool, by the way, again, like AI. And I had worked on projects using GIS at that time, and then I saw that, representation that helps others other than my specialty will make everyone understand. So we are all on the same page, which is maps, narratives. So this was a key element for me to reflect what do we need from everyone around us.
Oh, wow.
So maps, I would call it aerial images that had elaboration, analysis using AI, or even simpler methods would give you sights and insights of how to deal with scenarios in the future.
That's fascinating, because I don't know if everyone else does this, but once you start to look at a map, you wind up starting to look at a different level of specificity, or you trace a path, or you're looking for another piece of detail, and you keep going deeper and deeper. Anthropology, actually, it makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't recommend the leap, but if you make that leap, you're looking at the implications of both the environment and people. So do you find yourself being kind of being the odd person out in the room and having a different perspective than other people? Because I think that's actually very valuable to have both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I am sometimes the odd people in the group, but I hire people that are good at calculating, because that's not my expertise. My expertise is to lead the game and making sure that the change is happening and that we're executing on the numbers and not just calculating and making sure that we're doing progress. I need to make sure that we execute. Because initially, when I started off working with sustainability, it was because I moved to Australia. And I saw every weekend that I went scuba diving, I saw how the coral reefs were in a terrible stand, right? So I thought to myself, people who are taking lots of tourists out diving every single weekend, and they're just hammering off all the coral reefs with their fins, that is a terrible business strategy, because they're not supporting what their main product is, and those are the coral reefs, right? So that was how it started off by me. So I ended up going to projects in Papua New Guinea and looked at all the different type of aspects and making a SWOT analysis on introducing ecotourism, or whatever they would call it, right? So that was how it started off by me, and I think my discipline within sustainability, or within anthropology, and my background within anthropology, is to understand how people can change and how structures can change and how you implement the right people, because the people in my team are environmental engineers, they have a business background, or they have an economic background, so we are all very interdisciplinary, but that's crucial when you work with sustainability. You can't just have like a couple of carbon reduction specialist.
Yes.
Because if you don't execute on that, you need to have a specialist feel. That's one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you need to be able to be a very good project manager, because you need to have every stakeholder, both externally and internally, on board. And you need to be able to communicate the results to all of these stakeholders. So it is a very interdisciplinary field, otherwise you're not going to succeed with sustainability.
Well, that's kind of what you were saying, though. You know, AI is a tool, right? So you're in a way, you're kind of the conductor of these orchestras. So you bring in the right types of people, you use AI for what its intended purpose is. But that idea of mapping and going deeper, I mean, I think that part is fascinating to me. So is that something that you think of when you look at what's next? Do you think of it in terms of, now I have a new area to map? Am I looking at another problem that if I map it and I get clarity, I can see what the issue is? Because, you know, they say scientists discover, you know, see what is, but engineers create what never was. And in a lot of cases, you are doing both at the same time. You're mapping and discovering, you know, what this landscape is, but then you're looking for solutions that have not been created.
It depends. Sometimes you want to prevent a problem that might happen in the future.
Yeah.
So you just predict what might be the reasons for creating this problem, and then you work out solutions.
Okay.
Or to create something new that would help other sectors, or develop something new that would support, you know, an ecosystem, I would call it. Eventually, it depends on many directions. Here in UAE, we have, I would call it, there are international trends, and as well as we have the strategic maps, strategic mapping, or strategic projects that are working on. Some of these are mainly to support UAE on a national level.
Okay.
And other project would also support UAE competitiveness file. But the most important thing is, what are our expected results again?
Yeah.
Some of the projects that we deliver would help many aspects and sectors we didn't even consider.
Okay.
And we had this recently. We were so impressed with being approached by private sector outside UAE, asking us for things we didn't consider. And here, when it comes, and this might be required in UAE in 10 years from now. So creating the proper incubator infrastructure, I would call it, incubating infrastructure for delivering. So outcomes, again, the future project is crucial. We don't just depend on you know, what I like or what others think that they might need, because you might need it, but other sectors would need it as well.
Okay.
So it's also collaborative eventually.
Well, that's, I think, maybe one of the biggest kind of lessons here from our discussion is that the collaboration is almost infinite. That you can take these combinations and continue to iterate. When people take a step back and they look at this issue of using AI, when they think about the implications, we're wrapping up here, so maybe you can start, and Cecily, just give me a sense of what's the thing you want people to take away from this? What do you want them when they leave here and they're thinking about, you know, how to look at the environmental impact from your perspective? What's the most important piece?
I would like for people to understand the footprint of the digitalization and what can be done. So it might not be visual to everyone what's taking place when you search on ChatGPT or something like that, but it has a huge impact. So make sure you reduce, reuse, and recycle as much as possible, also when it comes to electronics.
How about you? What do you see?
I would start from my house, from my kids. It's important to teach your children how to, your closer network, I would call it, your circle of impact, how to work out solutions that would, even if they are small, but it will help and support, because you can use the tools, for example, AI tool or any tool, using simply computer. gaming and many other ways. But starting from your own, from the circle of impact around you, to environmentally being more aware of how to start, this would be very, very crucial and as well beneficial for the society.
I appreciate that, because that if everyone does those types of things and they're more informed, that interconnectivity can snowball. It really can become exponential. So I really want to appreciate, I want to thank you for today. This is it's a different type of topic, and we were exploring it from two different angles. What I found interesting is, in the end, you were unusually well aligned. That the lessons, no matter where you start in this issue, come to kind of an agreement of both how to map, right, and then also how to use data to track and deliver those solutions. So thank you so much for being here.